Cartoon Network in the early to mid 2000s. What a wonderful time for cartoons. But two shows in particular that people just can't seem to get over is Samari Jack and the Powerpuff Girls. So much so that some have sparked this conspiracy. Could Samari Jack and the Powerpuff Girls take place in the same universe? Both of these shows aired on Cartoon Network in the early 2000s and had pretty similar art styles. Samari Jack followed the story of a samurai warrior whose single quest was to find a way to travel back in time and defeat Aku, the demonic shape-shifting wizard. While the Powerpuff Girls centered around three little girls with superpowers, Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, who were created by Professor Utonium and lived in the fictional town of Townsville. This popular conspiracy stems from a couple images from both shows that are pretty similar. The conspiracy speculates that Professor Utonium is a descendant of Samari Jack. The professor was given Jack's sword as a family heirloom, which carried a little bit of Aku's blood. The professor took the blood and created Chemical X, which he then used to create the Powerpuff Girls. However, the professor then unknowingly releases Aku back into the world. Aku sees what the professor has then created with his own blood. Enraged, he goes back in time to send Jack into the future, preventing him from having any family of his own, and therefore inevitably preventing the professor from creating the Powerpuff Girls. So here's the supposed timeline of everything. Samari Jack takes place somewhere around feudal Japan, and the Powerpuff Girls could possibly be set in the latter half of the 20th century. So if this is true, that means that by the time the Powerpuff Girls show up, Aku has been in control of the Earth for about 400 years. Well, this could explain why many of the monsters just show up randomly in Townsville. They were actually sent by Aku in an attempt to conquer the city, and the fact that later we see a destroyed Townsville while Jack is traveling in the future could mean that Aku succeeded. So, could these shows really take place in the same universe? It's hard to ignore that these shows are very similar stylistically. However, there is a logical explanation for this. Creators of the Powerpuff Girls and Samari Jack, Craig McCracken and Genndy had both worked at Hanna-Barbera, the animation studio that produced shows like Yogi Bear, Tom and Jerry, Scooby-Doo, and the Flintstones, and was famous for their style of limited animation, flat colors, and dynamic shapes. So then why all of the Powerpuff Girls references in Samari Jack? Well, Genndy was actually a producer on the Powerpuff Girls before he started work on Samari Jack. But it's not only Powerpuff Girls references hidden in that show. We can also see cameos from other animated shows like Quick Draw McGraw, Leonardo, Big Dog, and Chewbacca. I highly doubt these are canon in the show, so we can just assume that Genndy wanted to pay homage to his other animation influences. Okay, so then what's the reason for all of the monsters in Townsville? Well, it could make sense for all of them to be sent by Aku. The real reason the Powerpuff Girls are constantly fighting monsters is actually because Townsville is located near Monster Isle, which, as you can assume, is overpopulated by monsters. Still convinced this theory is true? Well, when asked in an AMA on Reddit if Powerpuff Girls and Samari Jack take place in the same universe, Genndy simply said no. And with that being said, I unfortunately have to give this conspiracy a 0 out of 5. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Cartoon Conspiracy. If you want to check out any of the research I did for this conspiracy, you can check it out in the links below. And if you click over here, you can get a preview for next week's video. As always, if you guys have any suggestions for conspiracies you'd like me to cover, make sure you leave them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next Friday.